A lot, Martin. That was a brilliant framing exercise, and we're going to continue on that same trend, talking about these very popular carrots, financing and basically bridging the cost gap between renewable. We mentioned blue, of course, but obviously conventional hydrogen. Yeah. So in order to be able to do that, I'd like to call our panelists on stage, who I'll just introduce in a second, and I propose to jump right in. Okay, welcome. So let me quickly introduce our group here, and then we'll just jump. So on the very end, Alexandre Paquot, so we'll call you Alex this afternoon, Director for Innovation for a Low Carbon and Resilient Economy at DG CLIMA. So that title is a whole work program in itself, so looking forward to hearing more about that. Paula Marques, here, CEO of EDF Spain, Rabab Boulos, EVP, Chief Infrastructure Officer at Maersk, and Kajsa Ryttberg-Wallgren, Chief Growth and Hydrogen Business at H2 Green Steel. So all of your companies have been mentioned in the conversations, in the slides, explicitly or implicitly, so I'm really looking forward to hear your perspective here from people in the field that are making these investments, looking at these investments, and how this intersects and interacts with the policy. Let's start with you, Alex. Obviously, the Hydrogen Bank has been mentioned a few times already. The policy direction is clear. There's a very clear direction of travel, very clear ambition, very clear binding renewable hydrogen targets now with the Renewable Energy Directive. But clearly there needs to be a push. The Hydrogen Bank so far is the main instrument here. So it's 800 million euros on the table so far. Can you walk us through where we are in the process, what stakeholders should be looking at as they engage in the first call for the Hydrogen Bank?
Dear colleagues, and thank you very much for bringing me into this panel. I'm sure it's going to be very interesting to hear from the actual users of this hydrogen or producers of hydrogen. So a few words about the Hydrogen Bank, and in particular the auction that we will be launching very, very soon. Now it is part of the Innovation Fund, so that's one of the carrots that we heard about. So now it's a concrete one. We have about 40 billion euros under the Innovation Fund. This is money coming from the EU ETS. So it's basically the auctioning of the allowances that bring that money to this fund. This is an EU-wide fund, so we really try to find EU solutions to the issues we are facing. And the scope is basically to help decarbonizing industry, so steel, cement, chemical sector, but also it is about stimulating innovation in the manufacturing and in the production of renewables. So this is what it is about. We have about 40 billion. You will tell me it's not a big carrot enough, but this is what we have at the moment. And to zoom now specifically on renewable hydrogen, we are for the first time going to launch this auction. And that's very new. First time we do it at European level. Very novel. This is now given to us as part of the revision of the EU ETS. It is going to be an instrument based on price. We heard a bit of criticism. Why do you want to organize a competition based only on price? Actually, we thought very hard about that and also consulted a lot stakeholders to come to the design of this first auction. And it came out that we need something simple, fast, and that delivers very rapidly on the production side. And this is why we decided to go for a very cost-efficient approach, which is an auction. So basically, the bidders will say how much they see as a cost gap compared to conventional hydrogen, and they will bid according to this costs. And we will rank the different bidders and decide on where to allocate this 800 million. So we are quite close to the launch. 23rd of November is the launch. Then 8th of February will be closing of the auction. And we'll have only 2 months to look at these offers and beginning of April, we'll have the results. And that's going to be very interesting for all of us, because for first time, we'll have a European price discovery instrument. So we're really going to see what is the price of renewable hydrogen in Europe today. And we will really start a European market with this auction. So it's a pilot, but we really have a good hope that it's going to be a successful one.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks a lot for those initial thoughts. Maybe your first reflection from you, Paula. You're developing several renewable hydrogen projects at EDP. Will an instrument like the Hydrogen Bank help you reach FID on those? And if it's not quite there yet, what else would you need in terms of policy instruments?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to be here today. Very interesting interventions and some signs of light. I especially liked when Vice President Šefčovič mentioned that the combination of funds will be very important. I believe it is a progress there. And also in your intervention, you mentioned the word simple. And I think that today the funding mechanisms in Europe are still a bit bureaucratic and complex, with different funding entities, with different programs, with different rules. And of course, when we compare it to some other geographies, that at that specific point, might be more agile than what we are doing in Europe, that can lure investments when we consider that comparison. We believe that the Hydrogen Bank is really a powerful and simple tool for funding. And we see it as progress because it will allow to fund CapEx and OpEx. And it's the most similar instrument to the US tax credit, and the IRA was mentioned already here today several times. And it can really be a significant progress when going forward. But of course, when we think about it, we might say everything is the sky blue and full of sun. Not yet, and it's important because I thought I liked the very positive tone that we started the debate, but we are running against time. We have here an emerging technology that it's not yet economically viable. We are competing between many different geographies, and we need to step up and really accelerate what we need to do up to FID. So however the rules of the Hydrogen Bank are yet with a pilot, it's really important regarding the domestic leg to look at some of the things. First point is the 800 million euros. It's, of course, a pilot, but still a small part of the investment required. No possibility of accumulation of the different aids, and that's a significant step that we need to move forward. There is another point that the promoters really assume the risk of the volume in case the off-taker goes back to the fossil fuel or quits the project. And also, we still have lack of information regarding future auctions and the availability of funds. And that's very important when you need predictability for the investors regarding the roadmap of development. And of course, we still have some unnecessary bureaucratic aspects to the auction that we believe that we need to improve. For instance, when we are considering that we'll have a guarantee if the project doesn't go ahead, perhaps it doesn't have to be combined with still a lot of letters, for MOUs to really guarantee the off-takers, for example. So in terms of cumulation, we really believe that this pilot is a good step forward, but it was still a missed opportunity to make viable projects that already incorporate some key elements to really make this new technology a reality. First of all, we already have projects that have already proven to be mature. They are not ideas, they are already on the ground. Some projects that have been already declared strategic, like when we have the IPCEI projects, that's of course not a guarantee that they will occur, but they are much further ahead in terms of the process. And although they have received support, it's not yet enough to reach FID. And so we really need to step up. We need to increase speed. And also there is an opportunity regarding the H2, the Hydrogen Bank, and you've mentioned in the previous interventions what can be done also at the member states. This is a mechanism that, of course, can also in the future be used at the level of the member states to really guarantee that in the national H2 budgets we use these type of mechanisms. Because in the next editions we will be allowed in terms of the member states to use it, and we really believe that this will be a good opportunity to fast up the process of auction and really to guarantee that we have a more agile development in reaching FID. So I would say that if I would choose one word, we need speed, and we need to go from paper to the ground.
Okay, so speeds. So we want speed, but we also want things to be done in the right way. So there's a balance to be struck here. And the overall context, Rabab, is that of all the projects that are announced, only 4% reach FID, according to the International Energy Agency. Yeah. So as an off-taker, this must concern you to a degree. I mean, can you comment on that nexus?
Yes, and first of all, let me start by saying very big thank you for the invite and for the introduction. Really happy to be here today. I would say, as an off-taker, it's not only, let's say, possible, it's also very essential to strike the right balance between the two. I want to spend maybe 1 minute on just to say where we came from as Maersk, or as AP Moller Maersk. And if you look just a few years ago, less than actually 4 years, we put let's say an energy transition ambition or decarbonization ambition to be net zero by 2040. At that time, it was a significant risk and a significant challenge because there was no green fuels at all, and also there were no ships basically to carry those green fuels. Fast forward to today, we have 25 ships that are on order that can run on green methanol. And also fast forward to today, actually last month we just named our first green ship, Laura Maersk, in Copenhagen. So clearly a proud moment, but I think the reason I'm mentioning this is that it's tangible. It's not a pie in the sky anymore. We have something here and now. And I think also the important thing is that we have seen quite a momentum in the industry. So 3 years ago, there were only 5 ships on order. Today, container ships, only 139 container ships on order. I know you heard the number 170. It's not different numbers, but I'm just only looking at container ships here. So 139 ships that are on order and are going to be, let's say, needing green methanol very, very soon. So quite a demand and quite a significant challenge, I would say, also, and comes with, with some bottlenecks. I want to focus on 4 things or 4 strategies that I think are really important to strike the right balance between speed and doing things right. The first one, we talked a lot about it, is actually about the regulations and having strong regulations in place. So the EU 55, Fit for 55 package is definitely a step in the right direction, but we need more. We need pricing to come into the picture. We've also seen IMO taking some really significant steps over the summer, and that was really great and well received from that perspective. But we also need the EU to push for progress on creating what we call the IMO global framework for the maritime sector, which is really, really important, so that becomes really tangible. So what I mean by this is that we need to transform the regulations to something that we can operationalize and work with in the maritime sector. So that's the first one that I think is really important, strong regulations. The second point is around financial support, and we spoke a lot about it in the last 1 hour. And I do think that the European Hydrogen Bank is, again, a very good step in the right direction. I think we will need significant support, not only on infrastructure, but also on research and development if we want to scale the production of green fuel. And that will require large budgets, and it will require a lot of financing to have the sustainable fuel. So the importance of financing is just going to be over-amplified over the coming time. And then the third one is around prioritizing hard-to-abate sectors. If we look at, let's say, our company, for example, we are a logistics company, so we have all different kinds of modes. We have rail, road, ocean shipping, everything. Some things can be done with electrification, some other things cannot be done with electrification. So I would say aviation and ocean shipping are two that really need that we prioritize because it is hard to abate. And then the fourth and the last point is around engagement of all sectors. I mean, this requires a lot of collaboration across all sectors and across producers, government officials, industries, financial institutions, customers. Everyone have to play a key role. And I just want to put it into perspective, maybe to end here on some numbers. So for Maersk alone to achieve the green transition and the numbers we put for 2040 and also for 2030, we will need 4 million tons of green fuel per year by 2030. The total production of green methanol. The total production of green methanol today is 100,000 tons. So a significant gap that we will need to be able to close. But it shows that there is a lot of demand in the picture. So I think these are important things that we need to focus on, and I think with the right collaboration, we can get there.
Fantastic. So you mentioned focusing on hard-to-abate sectors, aviation, shipping. Another one that comes to mind is, of course, steel, right? And so your work has been mentioned already, Kajsa. It would be perhaps helpful if you could help us, cut through basically this discussion around comparing the EU with the US. Yeah, obviously the US Inflation Reduction Act has acted as a model to a degree and is a beacon in this entire discussion. But when you look at Martin's slides and you stack up the national money, the EU money, etc., it more or less compares. Yeah, so how do you look at that as H2 green steel, and what do you think can be tweaked in order for us to, as Europeans, to really fully take that opportunity?
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for inviting us to be here today. So first of all, we have talked about the carrot and the stick already, and obviously without the hydrogen bank coming in, in Europe, it's been about the stick, and in the Inflation Reduction Act is definitely about the carrot. And for us, when we are looking where to invest, it comes down to the business case. It comes down to the returns that we can provide to our investors, and of course, how much CO2 we can take out. If we convert the Inflation Reduction Act money you can get for such a project, just from a federal perspective, it's about $3 billion for the volume of hydrogen that we would produce. If you assume that there would be no cap, so to say, here, what we see in the hydrogen bank, that would equal to $1, meaning $1 billion. So it's 3 times more. So that's just one point. It's much, much bigger. We think it's an excellent start, but there's so much more money available. Another thing that's already been mentioned is it's easy to understand, it's easy to apply. So what is then, there are a lot of other good things, I would say, with the hydrogen bank. But before I talk about that, I also want to mention what is very, very strong in the European Union that has been working for a long time. It's the ETS system. And this is a crucial part, together with the hydrogen bank, to really make Europe attractive and successful for this kind of investment. Because what is going on now, and it's not only the Inflation Reduction Act, but you have also other type of packages coming in countries like Canada, for instance. It is a race for green investments, and CO2 is obviously a global problem, so it doesn't really matter where you decarbonize them from that perspective. What we really want to see back to the ETS system is that from actually penalizing or having the free allocation coming on your process, which has been the case in steel industry, you get a certain amount of free allocation depending on if you have a blast furnace or not, rather move that to the product you produce. So you actually incentivize people to go for clean energy inputs. And in terms of the hydrogen part, today you actually get free allocations for producing grey hydrogen. How can we make sure that that is applied also for producing green hydrogen? And then if you combine that with the hydrogen bank, which I think is a great thing with the hydrogen bank, is that because you are trying to close the gap where you have the smallest gap, you are indirectly then incentivizing investments in places where it makes most sense in Europe. And it's not going to be the same cost all over Europe, right? It is much, much more efficient to do it in places where you have the possibility to utilize baseload, fossil-free energy, build out solar and wind, which is not everywhere. So that is, I would say that it's really welcome with a hydrogen bank. It should become a bit bigger to compete with the Inflation Reduction Act. But we also have the ETS system, which is very, very strong in Europe, and we don't see that coming in the US.
Okay, so picking up on that, Alex, I mean, the leitmotif seems to be there needs to be more, fine. One of the possible approaches here is to extend the hydrogen bank with auctioning as a service. And can you talk a little bit about what that is and how you expect national governments to engage in that and how stakeholders should position on auctioning as a service?
Yeah, first of all, let me thank my colleagues for the kind words about the auction that we are developing. I'm not so surprised because I must say we've done it together. It has been really a collective exercise to design this auction. I think colleagues that have been preparing this auction have been talking to thousands of stakeholders and experts in the field. So we really try to design it as best as we can. I'm sure we can improve, so cut the red tapes where we can. And we will take stock after the first pilots to indeed see where things can be improved. We've also designed a system which is as open as possible to start with. So for instance, no distinction in terms of off-takers. So at the moment this hydrogen is produced for whatever possible uses. We might have to reconsider that, taking into account what comes out of the first pilots. So we will be looking really at how it functions. I think there was very good points on the carbon pricing. I think indeed it needs to be combined with what we do on the funding side. And to come to your question about how to make it bigger, I think we heard it many times now, and please continue saying it because it will increase our chance for the next budget discussion in the Commission. But I would say, please also turn, and that's also what the Vice President Šefčovič was saying, please turn this also to member states, because this is what we are trying now with the auction as a service. So we are saying to member states, listen, we've been spending a lot of time and a lot of efforts in designing this auction. Terms and conditions are there. Make good use of it. So we are proposing to member states to pool their own resources into this auction so that they can cover projects within their territory which could not be financed with the hydrogen bank itself. So it's really, for me, a kind of a win-win-win. It's a win for the sector. It's a win for member states because it will really help them and not reinvent the wheel in terms of designing auctions. And it's win for us, for the Commission, because clearly we see a big perspective for this type of instrument. And just maybe to add that this idea of pooling resources from member states into the Innovation Fund is something that we have also in mind for the grants, because here we've been talking about the auction, so really looking at the price-only criteria, but we also have a call for proposals based on grants, which cover up to 60% of the funding gap, and that's based on excellence. So looking really at innovation and many other criteria. And there also, we see that there are many projects interested, but we can only fund part of it. So what we are proposing now is to give to these very good projects, which pass all the criteria, to be considered with a seal of sovereignty, so really best project in Europe, and to propose to member states to also fund these projects. So there we really have a common European approach to try to speed up, as we heard many times today, this decarbonization.
So if a project meets the criteria but doesn't actually get any money, it gets a sovereignty seal,
yes.
And you recommend that national governments
yes.
support that via auctioning as a service with their own resources.
Or with other means,
other
because with the EU ETS, the revenues from the EU ETS, the auctioning, we talk about dozens of billions for member states. Mm-hmm. And now with the revision of the EU ETS, all this money must be spent on climate. There is no choice for member states. They have to spend it on climate-related purposes. So what we tell them is, we are organizing this competition at European level. you can come in instead of having a kind of fragmentation of the European market, also where state aids can be used differently depending on the availability of funds in the member state. Here you have a big pot of money that everybody can use using the auction as a service or the seal of sovereignty, as I just explained.
Okay, Anna Paula, perhaps a reflection here on the fact that as EDP you've qualified for IPCEIs, secured funding under the Innovation Fund, got also national funding. But you were saying before that the blending of all this was a struggle. And perhaps if you have any other reflections on what was mentioned until now on the panel.
Starting by saying, in our case in EDP, we are currently present in 29 markets and all across the value chain. And we have a very ambitious business plan up to 2026 because we are going to be 100% green by 2030 and net zero by 2040. And so we are investing up to that period around 26 billion euros in terms of our technologies, which 80% of our investment is in renewable energy, in networks, and also in emerging technologies. So what we've seen, and we've been awarded 2 innovation funds, 3 IPCEIs in terms of Spain, and quite what we believe, and thanks to our teams and our partners, a very unique project because we are converting all our prior coal plants in terms to green hubs. So going from coal to green, not virtually, but with very concrete projects already on the ground. And the difficulties that we are facing is all those green hubs, they combine green hydrogen, flexibility, storage, and renewable projects, of course. And what we are seeing is significant challenges in terms of the funding gap that we still have to have it really on the ground. So what we've seen is that we have several projects already in advanced stage of development, which is quite good. Hydrogen plays a key role in those projects, but as renewable hydrogen is not competitive today still when we compare it to the fossil fuel alternatives, and that has occurred in other technologies when they were at an emerging stage, the combination of the different funding mechanisms is really key for success. You've mentioned business case. It's like when you are investing in 29 markets in different types of technologies, of course, you invest in some that are already very mature, in others that are at an emerging stage, but you need to have a business case because you need to discuss it with investors, you need to have predictability in terms of those investments. Of course, you also need to take risks, but at up to a certain level. And so what we see is that we have the experience of this participation and we are facing the challenges of reaching FID because of the results of the funding calls, of these combinations. So what we believe is that these mechanisms that we have today, they still do not provide the required support that we need to have viable business cases, which we can see that we still need to bridge that funding gap that we have for the projects. To give some examples of what we are seeing on the ground, if we look to the important projects of common European interest, in our case, we have 3, just in Spain. Of course, this was created to streamline the authorization process and to allow projects to go beyond the normal funding rules. However, the process, first, it took 2 years to complete. That's why I'm talking about speed. It's not unrealistic speed, but it's really committing with the calendars. And even 1 year after receiving the EU authorization, there is still a lack of visibility of the subsidies that will exist and about the funding that will come from the member states and how we will combine it. So in our case in Spain, where we have been awarded 3 of the projects, it is still unclear how the funding mechanisms will be implemented. And although in our case we are moving forward in terms of booking equipments, permitting, all the authorizations, the connections, what we are seeing is that the funding schemes is really affecting how the projects are being developed. And that's what I'm talking about, what happens in terms of the plan and what's happening in reality. So until the H2 funds are channeled through the hydrogen bank, because still, as you've mentioned, it's yet the first pilot, or through similar mechanisms that cover CapEx and OpEx, it's really important that you will allow this accumulation of funds. And just to give some of the examples, what we are seeing is that in some of the mechanisms, you can only cover a part of the CapEx. So in some of the mechanisms, it only covers part of the CapEx, less than 50%. And when we look at the levelized costs of hydrogen, we know that this CapEx only accounts for 25 to 33% of what we have in the projects. So we still have a lot of room to improve, and we have a window of opportunity. And of course, in these projects, they will take still a couple of years to develop. But it's important to build trust in this emerging technology, and especially when you have different types of investments where you can apply them in different technologies and in different geographies. We cannot have a confidence crisis in this emerging technology, and in order to do that, we really need to guarantee that this combination will allow us to bridge the gap that we still have.
All right, very clear. So, Rabab, I mean, for these projects to go forward, investors also need to have confidence that the underlying infrastructure is going to be there, right? And so what do you think is going to be the role of governments in assessing that? And how do we size the infrastructure needs and the investment needs in order to do this right?
Yeah, thank you. And indeed, a very relevant question, the role of the governments. I would say they play a key role, of course, in investing in infrastructure broadly, but also I think it comes to streamlining the permitting process. I think that is really, really a much need for that. And I think also something around ensuring the policies support the transition. And the cooperation, not just within the EU countries in the government, but also with the neighboring countries outside, is really, really important for this journey. The other part that we speak a lot about is just offering incentives to the private investments to happen, because without these incentives, basically, the private sector will not, will not have an incentive to move forward. I think another key element is this thing about optimizing infrastructure for short-term gains. So while it's really important to think about the long term and where we're going, I think we need to think about what is the existing infrastructure, what is the existing resources that we have, and we optimize for that. And the reason for this is the urgency that we have. We spoke about it. We have a climate crisis. We cannot wait too long. We actually have to act now. And to act now, we need to optimize also the resources that we currently have when it comes to infrastructure. And then the last one is this thing about securing feedstock for hydrogen derivatives. This is really, really key. And when I think about our journey on the green methanol, the key, let's say one of the key challenges that biogenic CO2 is very scarce. So the governments will play a role not just in, let's say, offering incentives for carbon capture and storage, but offering incentives for carbon capture and utilization. And that will be key because of the scarcity that we're seeing with the biogenic CO2, which is the feedstock basically for the green methanol. One more element is also that the government can support systems where fuels are certified green on a mass balance basis. Until things scale on the green methanol, I think there's something around this mass balance that can help at least to offer incentives and support from the government. So just in conclusion here, I think there's a lot that the governments can do. They already started on some things, but if we want to scale as much as we want to scale, and with the ambition levels that we have been talking about, there is a lot more that can be done from the government side.
Okay, thanks a lot. Kajsa, we've been talking a lot about challenges, margin for improvement in optimizing policy. Can you reflect a little bit on what are the strengths of Europe in terms of developing a renewable hydrogen ecosystem?
Yeah, definitely. to take one step back, and if you look in heavy industry and more specifically in the steel industry, what made you successful in the past is not going to be the same that will make you successful moving forward. And I would say that Europe has everything that is needed to become the powerhouse of a green transition of the steel industry. It doesn't mean that we should continue to do or produce things that we do in the places where we do today. It means that we need to rethink. It means that maybe we should, I shouldn't say stop, but is it really hydrogen that should be distributed to the incumbent steel mills that we have in Netherlands, Germany, the UK? Or is it actually a derivative that we should focus on and use the advantages that we have in Europe? We have places where you can produce the derivative rust, which is sponge iron, at a very low cost, very, very efficient process. That is a product that is easy to distribute, and then you can instead focus on keeping the engineering skills, so the downstream capabilities of steel making where you have them today. I would say that because then you can really utilize the advantages of renewable assets that's already in place or can be built out, where you actually also have the iron ore in Europe, and now obviously I talk about northern Sweden and Norway, and bring that to where you have the engineering skills in Central Europe. That's one advantage that I see. Another thing is that, and it was mentioned before, we have just raised about 1.5 billion euro in equity, and that is to be combined with about 4 billion euro in debt. That is quite impressive. We are extremely proud of making that happen in such an environment that we are today in terms of the financing climate. Why we can do that is because there is a willingness to pay in Europe for a green product. And it's basically influenced by two things. One thing is that we have a consumer that is cautious about what he or she buys. So they are willing to pay a premium, not for all steel, but for certain segments in the market, there is a willingness to pay a premium. In our contracts, we have about 25-30% take or pay premium on brown steel. 7-year contract. When we started this, the banks told us, you will never get a steel contract, a long term with a premium, never. And now we have contracted 50% of our volume coming out for the first phase, which is 2025, 2.5 million ton. So it is possible. There is this willingness to pay. You don't find that in the US. So that should definitely be leveraged in terms of how you can finance a project. So all in all, I would say that Europe must stop to sub-optimize per country. We should really see it at what we have as a total union, produce green hydrogen at large scale for the offtake close to it. Now I talk now before 2030. That's how you can finance a case, not only from subsidies. We will need that to accelerate. But it's really about how you can attract the private financial market and also kind of risk mitigate for the debt structures. So use that, keep the engineering skills where you have them, and then we can really be the powerhouse for the green transition.
Okay, great, very clear. Alex, I mean, you heard a lot of talk about capital-intensive investments, the need for long-term visibility, et cetera. So a pilot auction, results announced in April. Great, very clear. There's going to be some learning to do on that, for example, focusing on the right end uses, potentially in the subsequent auctions. What happens next after this pilot auction? What about the cadence and volume of subsequent auctions?
Yes. Let me first explain that it's not only about the auction that we will be doing, this 800 million euros. I think we've been, during the last couple of years, supporting a number of projects in the hydrogen value chain. And I think my neighbor here on the right is a beneficiary of one of them. And by the way, well done for the very innovative process that you are putting in place. So we have a number of projects across Europe, be from the manufacturing sides of electrolyzers to the whole value chain, to the off-takers, that are being supported by the Innovation Fund. And on top of it, we will have very soon the auction. And hopefully the auction as a service with member states helping us to make it bigger. What I wanted to say is about, indeed, a bit of the complexity around all these instruments. And here I only talk about the Innovation Fund, but I think you also refer to other type of funds. And the Executive Vice President also mentioned this issue of how to make sure that we offer the best service to industry in Europe so that they can build really a business case and reach FID as soon as possible. So this is something that we will be continuing doing. I think it's not only about grant, but it's also about loan. So the role of EIB and InvestEU will be also critical. So if I come back to your question about what's next after the pilot, I would say that wait for the next couple of weeks and there will be more announcements. I can't say too much at the moment, but we will definitely continue a new call, a larger call under the Innovation Fund. We will continue very much to support manufacturing of clean tech because we believe not only electrolyzers but also wind manufacturers, battery manufacture, they need to take place in Europe. So we will continue to focus on that. We will also expand, hopefully, our auction, but first we need to evaluate. So give us a bit of time. We very much appreciate the feedback that you all give us on how these instruments are working and how they help you on the ground. I'm sure there are ways to improve, so we're very open to any suggestions on how to make it better.
Great. We very much look forward to those announcements in the coming weeks and well noted on the other tools that are at hand here. Okay, so we're going to take a coffee break. Please be back at 4:15 for the next session, which is going to be on the supply chain, moderated by Valburga from Solar Power Europe. And please join me in thanking our panelists for this session.